I told my roommate I just got back from a date. Then she said, "She can't love you like I do." The night I came home smiling should have been the beginning of a beautiful love story. Instead, it became the night that forced me to question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the person who had quietly stood beside me through the darkest years of my life. Sometimes the loudest confessions are not spoken in crowded restaurants or beneath fireworks. Sometimes they are whispered inside a tiny apartment after years of silence, and once those words are spoken, nothing can ever be the same again. Before we begin, if you believe kindness, second chances, and true love still exist in this world, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone special, leave a comment about what love means to you, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us why the heart never truly gives up. When I unlocked the apartment door that Friday evening, I expected everything to feel ordinary. The hallway smelled like fresh coffee because my roommate always brewed another pot before sunset. Soft music drifted from the kitchen, just as it had nearly every evening for the past 3 years. Home had become a rhythm, predictable and comforting, thanks to the woman who shared that small apartment with me. Emma wasn't just my roommate anymore. She was the person who knew how I liked my coffee, remembered my mother's birthday, noticed when I was pretending to be okay, and somehow always left encouraging notes inside my lunch bag on difficult workdays. I had never questioned why she cared so much. I simply believed we had become unusually close friends after life threw both of us into difficult circumstances. My father had passed away, leaving me emotionally exhausted and financially struggling. Emma had moved to the city after ending a long relationship that shattered her confidence. Sharing rent had been practical at first, but somewhere between late-night grocery trips and countless conversations over cheap frozen dinners, we built a friendship that felt stronger than family. That evening I carried flowers someone else had given me after my first successful date in nearly 2 years. I couldn't stop smiling because, for the first time since losing my father, I thought life might finally be moving forward. The woman I had met was kind, intelligent, and easy to talk to. She laughed at my awkward jokes and listened when I spoke about my dreams. For hours I replayed the evening in my mind while climbing the apartment stairs. Emma noticed the flowers immediately. The smile on her face appeared for only a second before disappearing. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy that I recognized then. It looked more like heartbreak trying very hard to remain invisible. I excitedly explained that the date had gone wonderfully. I talked about the restaurant, the long walk afterward, and how we had already agreed to see each other again. Each sentence felt lighter than the last until the room became strangely quiet. Emma looked at me with eyes carrying years of emotions I had somehow failed to notice. She quietly admitted that the woman I had just met could never love me the way she already did. Time seemed to stop. For several seconds I couldn't understand what I had heard. My mind searched for another explanation because accepting the obvious felt impossible. Emma had been my closest friend. She had celebrated every achievement, comforted every failure, and encouraged me whenever I wanted to give up. Never once had I imagined those acts of kindness were rooted in feelings she had hidden for years. She didn't cry dramatically or demand that I choose her. Instead, she apologized for finally saying what she had promised herself she would never reveal. She admitted that watching me leave for that date had been harder than she expected. She had hoped the feelings would disappear one day, but seeing me genuinely happy with someone else made her realize silence was becoming unbearable. That confession transformed every memory we had shared. I suddenly remembered the winter evening when I caught the flu and Emma stayed awake all night changing cold towels on my forehead. I remembered finding my favorite snacks mysteriously appearing after stressful work weeks. I remembered the countless sacrifices she made without asking for recognition. None of those moments had seemed unusual before. Looking back, they became chapters of a love story I had never realized I was living. Confused and overwhelmed, I left the apartment for a long walk beneath the city lights. The streets felt unfamiliar despite being ones I had crossed hundreds of times. I asked myself painful questions. Was I beginning a relationship because it truly felt right, or because I was afraid of risking the friendship already standing beside me? Had I ignored obvious signs simply because I never expected someone so close could love me so deeply? Over the following days, life became emotionally exhausting. I continued texting the woman I had dated, but every conversation felt strangely distant. She was wonderful, yet something inside me kept comparing effortless chemistry with carefully built conversations. Meanwhile, Emma became quieter than ever. She respected my space and never mentioned her confession again. She treated me with the same kindness she always had, although sadness quietly settled behind every smile. Watching her pretend everything was normal hurt more than I expected. One evening I visited my father's grave for the first time in months. He had always believed actions revealed character more honestly than words. As I sat there remembering his advice, I realized something that completely changed my perspective. The happiest memories of the previous 3 years almost all included Emma. Not because of extraordinary adventures or expensive vacations, but because ordinary moments somehow became unforgettable whenever she was around. Grocery shopping became laughter. Rainy evenings became board games. Difficult Mondays became easier because someone genuinely cared whether I came home safely. Love hadn't suddenly appeared after her confession. It had quietly surrounded me for years while I remained too distracted by expectations to recognize it. Still, fear remained. What if I misunderstood my own feelings? What if choosing her destroyed the friendship if romance failed? What if I simply felt grateful instead of truly being in love? Those questions haunted me until something unexpected happened. A week later Emma collapsed at work from exhaustion. The doctors explained she had been pushing herself too hard, working overtime while secretly saving money because she planned to move out after confessing her feelings. She believed creating distance would help me pursue happiness without guilt. Learning that broke something inside me. While she lay sleeping in the hospital, I noticed a worn notebook inside her bag. I didn't open it immediately because it felt deeply personal. Later, after she woke up, she quietly handed it to me herself. Inside were years of handwritten memories. There were tiny entries describing ordinary days that had meant everything to her. The first movie we watched together. The night we stayed awake assembling broken furniture. The morning I surprised her with breakfast after she lost her job. She had recorded moments I barely remembered because they had become precious pieces of her heart. Reading those pages made tears impossible to stop. This wasn't an impulsive crush. It wasn't loneliness. It was years of patient, selfless love expecting nothing in return. After leaving the hospital that evening, I finally called the woman I had been dating. She deserved honesty. I explained that someone from my life had helped me discover feelings I didn't realize existed. She thanked me for telling the truth before either of us became more deeply invested. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was the right one. For the first time in weeks, my heart felt peaceful. The following weekend I prepared dinner inside the apartment where everything had begun. Nothing was extravagant. There were no expensive decorations or dramatic surprises. Just homemade pasta, candles placed carefully on the tiny kitchen table, and a handwritten letter resting beside her plate. When Emma arrived home, she looked confused. I told her that sometimes life disguises miracles as ordinary routines. Sometimes the person meant to change your life is already sitting across the breakfast table every morning. I admitted that I had spent years searching for love everywhere except the place where it had quietly waited with endless patience. She cried before I even finished speaking. Not because she needed reassurance anymore, but because hope she had buried long ago suddenly returned. We didn't rush into promises. Instead, we promised honesty. We promised friendship would remain the foundation beneath everything else. Months turned into years. Our relationship grew stronger because it wasn't built on excitement alone. It was built on thousands of ordinary days already shared before romance ever began. We already knew each other's flaws, fears, dreams, and insecurities. We had seen one another at our worst and chosen kindness anyway. That became the strongest foundation either of us could have imagined. If this story has touched your heart so far, please support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with friends and family, subscribing for more emotional stories, and telling us which moment moved you the most. Your support allows more inspiring stories like this to reach people who may need hope today. Special request: before the story ends, leave a comment below with the words, "Real love is built on kindness." We'd love to know how many people still believe that. Years later, whenever people asked how we first fell in love, they expected an extraordinary story. They imagined grand romantic gestures or love at first sight. We simply smiled because the truth was beautifully ordinary. Love hadn't arrived suddenly. It had quietly grown through shared struggles, small sacrifices, endless patience, and the courage to finally speak the words that had been waiting for years. Looking back, I realized my greatest mistake wasn't going on that date. My greatest mistake was believing love always announces itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers through simple acts of care, waits without demanding attention, and hopes that one day you'll finally notice the person who has been choosing you all along. And every time I remember walking through that apartment door carrying flowers from another woman, I silently thank fate for one honest sentence that changed my entire life forever. Sometimes the greatest love story doesn't begin when two strangers meet. Sometimes it begins the moment you finally see the extraordinary heart that has been quietly waiting beside you all along.